Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. Okay, we are welcoming Sara Graff to the podcast. Sara, I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time. And Sara is sharing with us her NFP journey. This is one of those episodes that we have in the NFP journey series. And so, Sara, could you start us off? What was kind of your first introduction to NFP? How did you come across NFP?
Yeah. So thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. This is fantastic. I love talking about this. I love sharing this with other people, especially because, people hear this little acronym and they don't know what it is sometimes.
Yeah. It's like, what are those letters even? Right. What does that even mean?
Right. So, so I came at it from maybe a few angles. When I was in my early to mid 20s, I was attending a Reformed Presbyterian church, wonderful people that I just grew tremendously in that church. And there was a family in that church. There were several families that had a lot of kids. And some of them were practicing this thing called NFP. I'd never heard of this. I grew up in a fundamentalist Baptist denomination. We can talk about that later, but natural family planning was nothing that I had ever heard of.
Sure.
I was aware that some people were experiencing side effects with hormonal birth control, but I was not aware that anyone knew of anything that was an alternative.
I think that's really common.
Yes.
We hear about, it's like people don't like the pill for one reason or another, but nobody knows what the alternative is. And the alternative is great. I mean, it has its drawbacks. We talk about that on the podcast, but the alternative is a way better.
Oh, it's so worth it.
Yeah.
It's so worth it. So at the time I was battling with some endometriosis that I ended up having surgery for. So I bought the big Taking Charge of Your Fertility book. Which I think is still,
you can definitely still find that.
Right. So I bought it and, here I was kind of going through it and very interested in it, but, just really had no idea beyond some discussions about cervical mucus and cervical position and things like that. And I don't know, it kind of was in my head and then out,
Yeah.
So, and then I had heard, that, I don't know actually if all the families kind of continued practicing NFP. I'm not really sure if it was for health or for moral reasons or anything. And so the theology tied up in it, of course, I didn't hear about or learn about until so much later.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Right. Well, and that theology aspect of it, I think in a non-Catholic sense is never discussed. I'm not sure that I've really ever met. And please, if you're a listener and you're not Catholic and you are practicing NFP for theological reasons, like I would so love to talk to you, please. But I don't really hear that very much. And so, and that theology is really based and rooted in Catholic teaching.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about, you've got a conversion story that's just really like, it's just tied in with NFP. And I think that's really cool. So tell me about this conversion process that you had.
Yeah. So it's always really funny, especially because I have so many non-Catholic Christian friends, my family, I'm surrounded. And so it's always really funny when I say, with a straight face, I converted to Catholicism, and invariably someone thinks I'm kidding and they start laughing and,
oh no.
Yeah. Always. It's really, really quite funny. But, where do I begin? So, I'm Italian. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Like a lot of conversion stories, I'm sure mine started before I was even born. So,
Yeah.
My parents would probably describe themselves as former Catholics. My father in particular went to top all boys high schools in Brooklyn, schools that were, putting out priests and just some really phenomenal education. My parents have always had a really deep respect for Catholic education and utmost respect for the education that they received. So I think what happened was in the late 70s and early 80s, there was this movement in the city. Protestant missionaries kind of moved in and, for lack of a better word, started targeting historically Catholic groups for conversion. And so, a lot of Italians, Irish, Polish. And so Brooklyn in particular became sort of known as the borough of churches, but not necessarily of Catholic churches. I mean, and so my parents converted to basically a fundamentalist Baptist sect. And so that's how my sister and I were raised. A lot in that ball of wax.
Yeah, we could go really deep in there, but
a lot of so essentially lots of sort of rapture theology really growing up, especially in the 80s and early 90s. A lot of that centered a lot of prophetic predictions and things like that. So that was really taking hold. Obviously sola scriptura, this idea of Bible alone. I wouldn't have called it that growing up because I was in a sect of Christianity that really did not have any doctrine or creed. We loosely knew who the reformers were. I was, invariably, I fell away essentially from the faith. I probably would have always said I was Christian, certainly not living like one in any way, shape, or form. This is the city and I'm 18 and it's, party central.
Yeah. New York at 18. Ooh.
Oh yeah.
It's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Great. Now I'm living my quiet life in Tampa. But yeah, and just, in a very liberal college also, and so birth control is just part of the culture. It's part of the world, and you're on it for acne or, all sorts of health reasons. It's the first thing that is suggested when you have an ovarian cyst. Mm-hmm. You have endometriosis. Well, go on the pill for a year and see if it gets better. I mean, so pervasive.
Right.
But even in my Protestant upbringing, the pill factored big time. The pill and, of course, all the sterilization methods. And that was just the norm, going on the pill during your engagement or having your 2.5 kids and, having some sort of sterilization surgery. And truly nothing struck me about that as wrong.
Yeah.
I would have really been hard pressed to say that was even on my radar. I always assumed that.
Yeah.
What you do when you're married.
I think that falls, just across the board, within our Catholic Church, unfortunately, in just like a full misunderstanding of the theological background on the teaching of human sexuality and marital intimacy. And so the people who are arguing that, birth control is fine and sterilization is fine, they can't see how that argument is wrong. There's like no base for it. And that's what we're trying to work on fighting here.
No, and oh my gosh, I mean, there's just such a web. You could go so deep with this. Yeah, I just assumed that birth control is part of your life. There's no other way. You have to do it. And so, fast forward however many years, my sister ends up getting pregnant on birth control. And subsequently, because she was...
Which is more common than people want to admit.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And that was, that's all I think a lot of times something has to happen personally for there to be a wake up call.
Sure. Yeah. So this was really your wake up call. Your sister getting pregnant while on the pill. It's like, wait a second.
Yes. And just
think about this.
Yeah. And really to look at what the, quote, failure rate is.
Right. That, I mean, and that's the terminology that's used.
Yes.
Yeah. The birth control pill has a failure rate of somewhere between 7 and 10%.
It's a massive failure rate.
That's huge. That's a big failure rate.
Yeah, it's huge.
And I'm sorry, that failure rate is with perfect use, by the way. Sorry, that 7 to 10%, that's with taking the pill every single day at the exact same time, never, ever missing a day. I don't think anyone who uses the pill is that good at it.
No. And this idea of, just double up on the next day, or you know what I'm saying?
No, I heard that too.
Yep. And actually, because of that, there was about 7 or 8 weeks that she didn't really even know.
Wow. Yeah.
That she was pregnant. So, by the time she found out, there were really only 7 months to prepare. My niece is a wonderful, beautiful child, 9.5 years old now. She's been the biggest blessing to our family ever. Wow, and my sister is the first person to say, to anybody who finds himself in that situation, come talk to me and it will all be okay. Truly, she's really good at that.
So great. That is so great.
So that was it. That was a huge witness actually, for both of us, my sister and I, who probably at the time we would maybe have loosely said we were pro-life, but not, to the extent today. Right.
Sure.
So I think that was maybe a little seed on this pro-life journey. So here I was in sort of this, Baptist upbringing, loosely, it's out of college. I'm not really going to church at all. I don't know if you hear my daughter crying.
No, you're good.
Okay. So, not in church, then, started going back. A friend of mine actually died and I was at the funeral and I felt this, it's only happened to me about 2 or 3 times in my life, but this very intense, I don't know, the Lord speaking to me. I don't know what you would call it, but you're going back to church.
Wow.
And it was a big wake up call for me. And I was like, okay, I'll go,
Okay, Lord. Yeah.
Right.
Great.
So interestingly, a church in my neighborhood needed a pianist. And so I called and I said, look, I'll do it, So I show up and it's this wonderful Reformed Presbyterian church that is not Catholic, right? They're Protestant, but they're doing all of these horrifyingly Catholic things. And I am horrified.
Oh, tell me more.
Oh, I like the skin on the back of my neck. And I'm thinking, I can't stay here. This is crazy town. They're saying the creed. They're taking communion every week. They're baptizing infants. And I'm like,
what?
Oh, no, can't do this. Nope. And at one point, I was sitting behind a family I was very close to, and we were all saying the creed. And I just stopped at the Catholic church part. I wouldn't say that sentence. And then of course I continued. And so the dad in the family, so funny, turns around and just looks at me, did you not say the full creed? Like, but making fun of me, but
just skip.
He just knew I wasn't there, And so here I am in this church and now I'm really in crisis because now I'm like, God, what is true? What is true? Like this, if this is true, then I was in the wrong place before. But if this is true, I need to know why. And then I need to stay here. If it's not true, I need to keep. And I was just in the throes of an existential crisis.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was great. It was exactly what I need. So in my mind, I made this really quick leap and I said, okay, the Catholic Church is doing all of these things that I've been taught my whole life are wrong and anti-biblical and, abhorrent to God. But this church is doing them. So I needed to find out why. And I needed to find out why the Catholic Church was wrong. But this church, which in my mind was sort of a midway point between a more independent fundamentalist upbringing, this church was very liturgical.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I just needed to find out, where was everybody on the continuum? Where,
right. Who is right about these things? Who is wrong about these things? And like, what am I really supposed to be believing here?
There you go. So I start ordering Catholic books on Amazon in secret, and I'm reading one of them in particular. In fact, Michael Corin. I absolutely love this book. I don't know where he is right now or what he's doing or what he believes, but he wrote this book, Why Catholics Are Right, and I bought it, and it blew me away. And I'm reading all of this, and I'm thinking, this has been kept from me my whole life.
Why didn't anybody tell me this stuff?
This is the best stuff ever. This is incredible. And I'm also reading C.S. Lewis, and people are suggesting Chesterton to me. These are, I knew Narnia, but not anything else. I mean, my mind is just, I'm in this like severe growth spurt, and it's wonderful. It's amazing. So I moved to Florida. I have a master's degree in piano, which is great for playing piano and teaching privately, and really won't do much else for you. So I needed a job, and I knew that if I applied to a Catholic school, I would not need to have a master's degree in education, and maybe they would hire me to teach music. And so I got hired at Incarnation Catholic School here in Tampa, and it was some of the happiest years of my life. I was there for 3 years, and my second year, so my first year I start, it's, August. And I have a lot of questions now, right? So now I'm in it, and I'm surrounded by people that are really living devout Catholic lives. Like they are striving for holiness. This is a new thing.
Right.
New, right? And there's a wonderful priest there who is really able to meet me in all of my questions and answer them to my satisfaction. I mean, that's a big deal. People need to feel heard, and they need to truly have the hard questions answered.
Well, and I think that, that one-on-one discipleship, I know this is a podcast about NFP, but now we're talking about conversion and discipleship, guys. But that one-on-one discipleship that priest walked with you with, that is so necessary. That's what we need to be doing. If we're trying to share the gospel with anyone, it is not about standing up on a soapbox and preaching. It is about just taking somebody out for coffee and meeting them where they're at and answering their questions.
And I would bring him my list. Okay, so this week, and I would bring him the questions that other people were grilling me on.
Fantastic.
Right. And I was getting some hard, I was getting, if Mary is sinless, why didn't she die on the cross for us? I wasn't getting, why do you, I don't know what would be an easy question. I feel like it's all difficult, but
all of it has so many different layers. Like,
right. Why do you kneel when you walk into a church? I wasn't getting questions like that. I was
sure. Yeah. I feel like that would be an easy question to, out of reverence. Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. No, there were I had no softballs being thrown at me. So, I'm now knee deep in the school year. Easter is coming, and I'm going to a Presbyterian church, and I've got one foot still in the Reformed world. I've got my one foot in the Catholic world, and I'm content to just stay here. I'm very happy. And my prayer is kind of like, Lord, I'll do whatever you want. I just really don't want to convert to Catholicism. Like, I'll do anything else. So how can we compromise?
Famous last words.
Right. God, how can I compromise and just go only halfway of what you want, right? Yeah. So Easter rolls around, and I'm committed to play Easter Sunday at the Presbyterian Church, and I'm committed to Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Vigil at the parish of the school where I'm working at. And Easter Vigil rolls around, and I'm like figuratively like on the floor, just dead, like I can't believe what I'm seeing. This is the height. I mean, it was like being in heaven. And
right. I mean, Easter Vigil Mass is talked about as like the Mass, right? Well, Holy Thursday and Easter Vigil Mass, like those two masses are like, they are the Mass of the Catholic Church. Like
it is the height of beauty, of reverence. Mm-hmm. And I kept seeing small things that, of course, I didn't understand at the time. I still don't fully, all of the physical things that priests do at the altar, all of the things they say quietly. And I'm, I also play violin. So I'm sitting in the sort of orchestra section with my violin, but I'm kind of, looking at the altar. I'm like, what's going on? What are they doing? And just really in awe. I'm seeing things being whispered. I'm seeing, and so Sunday morning rolls around and I play at church, at the Presbyterian church. And I know in my heart that this will be the last time I receive communion in a Protestant church. I'm done.
Wow.
I knew that I would either never receive communion again, or God was going to ask me to do something that I wasn't ready to do yet. I knew it. I saw, it was like the boulder coming at me,
Yeah.
And now I'm understanding that such a big part of the Catholic teaching and acceptance are the teachings on human sexuality and marriage and family and the human body, and all of these teachings that I didn't grow up with as formal, standardized doctrinal teachings. Right. I mean, and I say this a lot, and I try to say it in love, and I mean it in love. There are really no sexual standards in the Protestant world. And I think I can say that with some confidence because I've spent so much time in various Protestant churches, and the attitude seems to be twofold. One, if you're not harming anyone, it's okay. And two, if the Bible doesn't explicitly prohibit something, then you're free to do it. And that really...
There are a lot of things that the Bible doesn't explicitly prohibit.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's a rabbit hole. But yeah. And, coming face to face with church teaching, capital C, was something that I thought, man, I love Mary. I've been like dying to talk to her. I'm ready for Mary. I have no issues with Mary. I was tired of how she was being treated by, the Protestant church. I was like sticking up for her.
I love that.
I even liked the Pope. This was right at the beginning of, I guess I had started reading intently at the end of Pope Benedict, right as Pope Francis was coming in. I was fascinated with the Pope. I completely understood. I had been through enough church splits that I completely understood the common sense of that. I had no issues with, so here I am. And my issues are abortion. In the case of the life of the mother, this was a big thing that I was hung up on. Of course, I didn't understand nearly what I do now about that phrase.
Right.
And obviously contraception, I thought there's just no way, right? It's 21st century, right?
Yeah. How is this, large institution still stuck back in 1600?
Right. Yeah. They want to, they want me to have a bad marriage. They want to tell me what to do in the bedroom. And the Eucharist. So I always, when people say, well, why'd you become Catholic? I always say the Eucharist and contraception. And nobody wants to talk about the Eucharist. And they're just like, what do you mean?
They're like, what do you mean by contraception? What?
What do you do? Yeah. So
we just don't have sex. That's what Catholics do.
Exactly. Well, we're prude and
yeah.
We're fun. Meanwhile, to my Baptist friends, I constantly joke. I'm like, come to the dark side. We drink alcohol. We dance. We have sex with our husbands. Like
we do all sorts of crazy things.
I'm joking. I'm saying it in good fun. So I'm now at Incarnation. So it's after, it's now between Easter of 2015 and Easter of 2016. And I'm reading on my lunch break one day. I'm reading Humana Vitae.
Oh,
and
that'll get you.
I was done. I was like, how do I go back to work after this? First of all,
like, how does that happen? Second. My mind was just like completely blown.
Oh, friends, if there is nothing else that you read for the rest of the year, it's public domain.
Go get it. It's free. Just go search it. It's on the Vatican's website. Print it out, highlight it, underline it, circle it. Or if you don't have a printer, then just read it online.
Just read it online. That's what I did. I read it on my computer. And I remember I think that was one of the final like little walls. Like, I just thought, I'm done, because if this is not the truth, there is no truth, and I can just go do whatever I want.
Sure. Right. And I think when we talked before we started recording this, you had mentioned, if the Catholic Church is right about this, that's it. Like that, then they must be right about everything else, because this makes so much sense.
And so here I am, and I'm in my I'm really realizing now that I'm probably going to convert, right? I'm going to have to tell my parents. It's going to get out, like I can't do
you can't really like secretly convert to the Catholic Church.
No, there's no. The church is very much, and you learn this, right, about things being public.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like all masses are public, weddings are public, like everything.
It's important.
It is. So, I make this decision, and part of it too, I had this piece in the back of my mind that, I had a feeling I was being called to marriage. Well, I had a feeling I was not being called to consecrated life, right? Whether or not I was going to meet a husband, that was for the Lord to decide. But I had a feeling that I was not being called to, this other life.
Right.
And so here I am reading Scott Hahn, right, over and over. I end up marrying one of his students.
Solid.
So I always joke, the minute Greg said that on our date, I was like, okay, we're done. We can.
You can just put a ring on my finger. Right
there you go. We're done. Yeah. So here I am, right? I'm reading Scott Hahn and all of this, and I'm really realizing that if I were to get married, I wanted a Catholic husband. I wanted the truth, like, what is a Catholic marriage? And it's twofold, right? The idea that I can't do whatever I want to not have children, and I can't do whatever I want to have children.
Yeah.
And
right.
So,
there are both sides of this. And we talk a lot about, I can't do whatever I want to not have children, but that is a really important other side to it. You also can't do whatever you want to have children.
Right. This idea that the child has rights.
Mm-hmm.
The child has a right to be born, into a certain family via a certain way. It really blew my mind. And it was something too, because I had the surgery for endometriosis about a decade prior. And, was I going to be able to have children? Right. I mean, just this idea that to be on the same page with someone, it came up on our first date. Boom. Very, very clear. I tell young women all the time, marry someone that you have the same values as.
Yeah.
Values. Who cares if they like chocolate cake and the same movies, and none of it matters.
Values.
That's it. And that got laid within the first 2 hours. And so fast forward, I ended up having a C-section.
Mm-hmm.
And just even in all of that, in using NFP post C-section, post surgery, just knowing that my husband was meeting me in that place, we really, we both, I had to heal, then we had to abstain,
mm-hmm.
Cycle had to return to normal. And NFP just, it's a way of practicing the ultimate trust.
Yes, absolutely. In both, there's more than two here. So not even both, in all of like trust in your spouse, mm-hmm. trust in God and his design, and trust in your fertility, and then trust in like your observations or your monitories. I think that you had mentioned you used Marquette postpartum.
Yes.
And
I love it.
I
still use it. I will sing Marquette's praises until the day I die.
That is so great.
What a time to be alive. The monitor says low, high, and peak. Friends, you cannot screw this up. No, I mean, I'm so grateful for the monitor. I'm so grateful that this is, and I've actually heard that there's more at-home testing that's going to be available in the coming years.
There's just getting so many. It's just getting started.
Oh, it's
just
so fascinating.
Different kinds of monitors and testing. I mean, there are like electrolytes in your urine that change, and there's like there's electrolytes in your cervical mucus that are changing throughout your cycle. Like there's all these different things that can be monitored and are being researched right now. Oh my gosh, we're totally getting on a tangent here, but it's very exciting.
It's so exciting. And it's, and especially coming off the surgery, I feel like I'm in a unique position to say to people, it can be trusted. You do not need to insert something into your arm or insert, this device into your uterus. And, having that hard but loving conversation, many of these hormonal contraceptives do not prevent fertilization. They prevent implantation. And anybody who is of faith, who's a Christian, who's a person of goodwill, should know that truth. And to be able to then really look and say, is this something that I should be doing? And despite the fact too, that I was sitting online reading the FDA contraception document. It was 99 pages. Oh my goodness. This should be in the hands of every woman between the ages of 18 and 48 in this country.
It is so scary.
It is.
It is so scary. Well, and it's like, if you get, if you get a prescription for the pill and you get your box and it's got 3 months of, packets in it, or, however it's packaged. This was my experience. And it comes with this tiny little piece of paper. And you're like, oh, this must be the warnings. And then you start unfolding it, and you unfold it again, and you unfold it again. And it is this massive piece of super thin paper. So it doesn't seem like it's that big if you don't unfold it. But I mean, it is like if you took a newspaper and unfolded it fully, not that any of us know what newspapers look like anymore, but it was bigger than an unfolded piece of newspaper, and it was front and back.
Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh. And no one reads that. No one reads those things. Yeah. And if they do, they don't really take them seriously, because doctor was like, oh no, and it's no big deal. Everybody's on the pill. It's totally safe. Right. It's not totally safe.
No, it's really not. And then, we know too, just the spiritual effects that it has on your marriage, on your conscience. I think that some of this too is tied into church teaching on the whole of the person, the whole of the relationship. When you are dating and you're practicing chastity, it prepares you for NFP, for times of abstinence, not just postpartum. Right. What if someone is sick and is dealing with chemotherapy, or there's a deployment? It's the totality of the teaching that is so mind-blowing. It could only be divine.
Right. It makes sense and fully agrees with itself from start to finish. It just all makes perfect sense. And yes, Sarah, that's such a good point of, the chastity that we practice before marriage. It's not just this burden that we have before marriage. Chastity is harder when you're married. It is harder. Oh, right.
Yes.
Chastity doesn't just go away once you're married. It gets so much harder.
Right.
Because suddenly sex is an option. It is a fully licit option with your spouse, not with anybody else.
Right.
But if you have reasons to avoid a pregnancy, now you need to abstain. And that chastity, boy.
Oh yeah. So the joke in my house, when we're in, we're in a place right now where we've discerned to avoid. So when we're in the fertile window, you know, I'll joke with my husband, this is your opportunity to grow in virtue. And, you know, he's like, I didn't get married to grow in virtue. He's kidding. This is a big joke, but it's, you know, I didn't get married to die to myself, you know, like,
you know what? We just don't talk about that enough in like marriage prep or just even like before marriage prep of like, getting married is not for fun. It is for growing in virtue and walking with somebody and bringing them to heaven, and they're going to bring you to heaven. Like that's the goal of marriage, is like, let's come together and bring each other to heaven. It's not about having fun. I mean, you can have plenty of fun in marriage. Like marriage is great.
Right.
But just make sure your priorities are ordered correctly.
And it's temporary, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's another good that we're loving and enjoying that's temporary.
Right.
And, you know, just knowing, you know, especially even in those very first few weeks of marriage, like this is something that impacts you on day one. Mm-hmm. When I came home from the hospital, I was in the hospital for 5 days, came home, and, you know, all of a sudden, they're different. You know, you're working together as a team, you're taking turns feeding at night. Things are not, you know, hot and sexy for a couple of weeks. You're surviving and you're healing. And just to know that there's no resentment from one person to the other. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, birth control makes people available to each other all the time in a way that I think was not the intention. Mm-hmm. I don't think that was ever supposed to be, you know.
Right. Well, just the full understanding that you and your spouse have of the teaching on sexuality and marital intimacy, and how NFP fits as a perfect puzzle piece into that teaching. And that is where that trust that you're talking about lies. You know, it's not just that one of you is saying, okay, we have to practice NFP just because that's the Catholic Church thing to do. It's like, no. Right. We're practicing NFP because we fully agree and align with the church's teaching on marital intimacy and the primary purposes of sex, which are unity and procreation, and that they go together and you can't separate those two. Right. And so we fully understand that. We fully agree with that. And so therefore that means we have to live that out. We have to practice that. And that means if we're not ready to have a kid, then we're not ready to have sex.
Right. Right. And that, you know, it's like 100 years ago, I feel like that would have been a very normal statement.
Right. I think there was a better understanding just of our general fertility and the purpose of sex 100 years ago. And now with the birth control so prevalent in our society, it's like people are, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but like when someone's confused that they got pregnant, it's like, no, you got pregnant because you had sex. Yeah. Like, that's why
your body did what it's supposed to do.
Yep.
And your birth control did what it does, which is fail.
Yeah.
So everything works. Everything's working just as it should. And that's the truth. It's a very hard thing to say and hear, but that is the truth. Yeah. Right. So yeah, exactly. You know, how did this happen? Well, you know, I wasn't there, but I can tell you how it happened.
Yeah. Do we need to go back to biology class?
Right.
Oh my gosh. Sara, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Oh. Is there anything else you wanted to add in before we close out?
No, just, you know, if you're someone who is feeling maybe the pressing truth, the Holy Spirit, you know, or you're curious, or you're on the pill. Maybe you're not sexually active. You're just a single woman who's on the pill and you don't feel good. I don't know if you're feeling that, follow that thread where it leads.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Pray about it, follow it. The Lord will reveal the truth to you. I firmly believe that if you're looking for the truth, there's only one truth and God will give it to you.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Sara. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are not following us on Instagram, be sure to find us at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you would like to share your NFP journey, reach out to me on Instagram or send me an email. Links to those are in the show notes. We'd love to share your story as well. Until next time.